Hello, my name's Dr. Thomas Swift, and I am a scientist who works in polymers and chemistry, and I teach chemistry at the University of Bradford. And one of my main roles here is the program lead of an apprenticeship delivery program where we offer full degrees to laboratory scientists, employees of companies around the United Kingdom who do a part-time degree because they're actually employed as laboratory scientists in an apprenticeship format. The degree that we teach is designed to be as close a match as possible to the Royal Society accredited degree that we offer. But the format of the apprenticeship delivery really interests me because this is a standard that was approved by the UK Civil Service back in 2019, I think, maybe possibly before. But it followed a life science and industrial science trailblazer group that was headed up by companies, big industrial, multinational, international companies that work in the various scientific arenas in the United Kingdom. It had training providers, so that's colleges and universities, in which I was a representative of. So I attended, and some of my other colleagues at the university attended these meetings. And there was also civil servants and other stakeholders. And one of the really interesting things that happened is the UK around this time was getting a little bit nervous about the number of apprenticeship degree standards that were popping up. And they took the view, they don't care if you're a chemist, they don't care if you're a physicist, if you work in nuclear fusion, or if you're a biologist and you look at microbes, or if you're a cosmetic formulation scientist and all you want to do is make good skin cream that makes people feel good and look good about themselves. If you work in a laboratory and you're a scientist, then we want one standard that covers all of you. And this standard, it's up for review, it will be changed, but before it goes out the way, I've been delivering to this and teaching on this program for a couple of years, and I find it really interesting the way it's worked out. And of course, this is civil servant bureaucracy and jargon. But talking to other scientists around the United Kingdom, I've got to ask them. I have been delivering and assessing against a knowledge, skills and behaviour set, which is the language that apprenticeships use. In higher education, we talk about learning objectives and module learning outcomes, and there's all sorts of stuff that we teach to. In academia, the knowledge, the expertise, the skills are absolutely the driving home, but it's all about furthering our own understanding. But in the corporate world, and as far as the government is concerned, there needs to be a very set number of knowledge, skills and behaviours that they will judge whether or not someone is worthy of being accredited as an apprenticeship completed scientist. If you don't have all of these 28, it's a rather large number of specifications. If you don't all hit these 28, as far as the UK government's concerned, you aren't really a scientist. So I thought these are worth going into. These are worth discussing because I'm a scientist. Most people I work with are scientists. Let's divide them into three subcategories. The first category is knowledge. These are things that an apprenticeship in laboratory scientist needs to evidence to prove that they have progressed and they've got a baseline level of fundamental scientific skill. The first of these is that the underlying scientific principles, principal theories, concepts and terminology of laboratory-based experimentation, including laboratory techniques relevant to the specialist discipline. So that's rather simple. If someone's going to call themselves a scientist, they should know some science. They should understand the principles and theories that underpin the area they're working in. I think we can all get on board with that. The second knowledge is the ways in which the advanced science and technology are developed, established techniques of scientific inquiry and research methodologies. So it's not just about understanding principles. We should understand how the history of our subject. We should understand the advances that have been made over the recent years, and we should understand how, things move forwards and we build upon established technologies. Science isn't static. It's changing with new advancements and new technologies all the time. So I think they're a really good first set of knowledges. Thirdly, the theoretical basis for applications of the science relevant to one specialist discipline, including how to apply this during the experimental design and implementation of research programs. I think in a rather critical level, you might say this point doesn't add anything new, but it is actually important. This is about linking together that fundamental underpinning from number one with the application and the development in number two. This is about saying, okay, we understand core principles, and that means that we can apply it and make new discoveries. Number 4, the requirements for the development and validation of analytical methods and instrumentation, including suitable sampling methods as appropriate to the specialist discipline. Not every scientist actually does testing, although if you break it down to it, science is about that process. It's about gathering data, testing it, and then proving it. So if you're going to be involved in that process, you need to understand what your testing methodology is. You need to understand how your scientific principles of your analysis work, and then understand what that tells you about the quality of the data you'll be pulling out. Just saying, I have a machine that tells me something, I go around and prod it against various things and see what it tells me, doesn't make you a scientist. Unless you understand what your analytical device is telling you, unless you understand how it, at least a vague idea of how it functions, what the data means, and how that does relate to those core scientific principles, you're not quite hitting this requirement. So it's an urging for all of us to go back and actually test, what our methodologies are and understand it from the ground up. This next one, however, takes that a step further. How to use statistical techniques, probability distributions, significance testing, and confidence limits, regression and correlation, and hypothesis testing to evaluate results, design experiments, and draw evidence-based conclusions. Most scientists, probably I would say, I'm going to be disingenuous here, most scientists do not have as good an understanding of statistical significance as they should. A lot of them do, and a lot of good, but I've seen professors and some very, very strong people out there make pretty fundamental mistakes about assessing and gauging the significance of their data. It's probably the largest area of research fraud out there. People outside of science might have heard the saying, a statistic can be made to say any lie you like, and mathematical people will talk about this till the cows come home. This tends to be used quite commonly in social sciences when people are looking at populations and quite emotive subjects, but core fundamental physical and life sciences are not immune from these problems. And if we don't understand the significance of our data, it reflects poorly upon us for not being able to do so. Number 6, how to independently implement new processes according to the literature. Data mining results and input from colleagues. If you want to carry out some new format of testing or new format and line of inquiry, you should either go to the literature, look at data mining and big data, or talk to colleagues and just, gain. We're not working in a silo. We're talking to other people. We are leading. We're independent. We do this planning and experimental methodology design, but we don't do it without tools that actually inform our choices. How to initiate, plan, execute and close a project and incorporate the organization's project management procedures into the scientific work environment, working with team members. Oh, this is a great one. A scientist doesn't just say, I am a scientist. They need to have a topic, a proposed work plan, something that they're going to investigate. They're going to investigate that, but within the restrictions of their workplace. So, companies, universities, academia, nowhere is an infinite well of cash. We are all in restricted environments. We all have practical limitations, and I think we need to know that we will butt up against those limitations quite regularly. And we'll also butt up against other people. Other people are a great form of, collaboration, but they can also be a hindrance. You work in a laboratory, you protect your space, you protect your equipment. If someone else is using a piece of equipment, you can't get on it. You've got a queue, you've got to find a working environment that fits everyone to fit together. Slightly more serious, but leading on from that, the internal and external regulatory environment pertinent to the science sector and area of specialization. For example, medicines and healthcare products, regulatory authority, control of major accident hazards, and good laboratory practice. So again, this isn't just about us being able to work in an environment. This is about us able to be able to work legally and safely and within the roles of our regulators. We know the law. We know the regulatory environment in which we work. And if something has ethical and moral quandaries, you would hope it's been well regulated and we've got a very clear framework to be working in. The business environment in which the company operates, including your personal role within the organization, ethical practice, and codes of conduct. Even if it's not regulated, number 9 says here, you should be aware of this stuff. And finally, the 10th and final knowledge, the requirements of internal or external customers and how to recommend the appropriate workflows, improvements, or scientific solutions. We don't do science in a bubble. We don't do it just to generate knowledge. You would hope, at least at some level, some of that knowledge will be useful to other people. And if we know, it behoves us to know in what way those other people would find what we're doing interesting. And then they would be, if they ask us questions, we're able to make recommendations to help them out. That's a truly great scientist. So that's 10 specific points of knowledge that the UK government says, if you know these 10 things, you've got all you need to know to be a scientist. But there are skills as well. So the first skill, to identify and use the scientific approaches appropriate to one specialist discipline required to solve problems, support new investigations, and follow up experiments in the laboratory. This standard is not written for any particular type of scientist. It's designed to cover all of us. We should all know within our subfield what our specific scientific approaches are within our discipline, and then we know how we can use them to solve problems. So this makes a lot of sense. Appraise scientific experimentation, independently design and implement new processes according to the relevant literature and other data sources interrogated using data mining techniques using input from colleagues. This is a slightly waffly way of saying, okay, just because someone has done testing doesn't mean it's useful. You should be able to judge an experimental method and decide for yourself whether it is useful, whether it actually pulls out the answer that you think it should. Whether, in the context of the literature, this isn't actually telling you what you think it is. This isn't about statistical significance. This is about scientific significance of sort of interpreting conflicting data from different sources and deciding which is the more rigorous. Number 3, support appraisal of the scientific experimentation with numerical and statistical analysis. First of all, you need to be able to judge scientifically, is this method sound? And then you should be able to analyse the data to actually tell you whether it's numerically and statistically sound, whether the significance of the conclusion you're drawing are supported. Number 4, work autonomously to analyse, interpret and evaluate scientific data and present the results of the laboratory work and the problem solving clearly and concisely in written and oral form. Again, there are scientists who are just theoreticians, but if you're a laboratory scientist, if you actually carry out lab work, you should be able to analyse and interpret your data yourself and then communicate that down, either when discussing with colleagues or in some form of written report. Comply with the regulations, including compliance with business rules pertaining to record keeping, data integrity, traceability and confidentiality. I think number 5 is a very important one. And this isn't just about funding and who pays for your science, although that is a separate and very important issue. But there is no point doing science if we don't have outcomes. And you can't have outcomes if you don't have a means of actually proving what you've done. Record keeping, having a good strong lab book, being able to show your methodology and your workflow and the evidence that all happened. In scientific publishing, we have a process called peer review where we show our results and then draw a conclusion from those results and other people have a chance to look over it. I've always been a strong believer that the more raw data you show off, the more of the actual working that you incorporate in there, the better other people are able to judge and compare their own results against yours. Promote and ensure the application of quality standards, safe working practices, and compliance with risk management systems relevant to the workplace in own work and the work of others. It's a skill to be able to work safely around other people. Use creative thinking and problem-solving techniques such as root cause analysis to challenge assumptions, innovate, make new proposals, and build on existing ideas. Scientists don't just follow protocols. We should be questioning, we should be curious, we should be pulling things apart and making suggestions to improve the world around us and to improve our own workflows. Autonomously plan and prioritize tasks. Review and evaluate progress against objectives and investigate alternative scenarios. This is quite an important one. If you believe that you are testing something, you need to have a method of inquiry. And as you go along that, you shouldn't be blind. We all have a hypothesis and what we're looking for, but you should be aware that there are other theories and hypotheses that might explain what you're seeing beyond the one you're thinking of yourself. Don't go in with blinkers on just saying, I'm going to prove this thing and no other outcome is acceptable. Contribute to the development of specific technical projects across a multidisciplinary team. Again, none of us are working in a silo. All have our own specific fields that we are experts in, and other people can often contribute. And the best science often is done when multiple people with different backgrounds come together to combine their skill sets. Ensure that targets are met and maintained within own area of responsibility, whilst complying with defined company procedures and legislative requirements. Well, this is a fun one. It's your job to meet your own outcomes. Whatever your job is to do, whatever it is you're investigating, it's your job to do it. But you've got to comply with procedures and legislative outcomes. You can't break the law to get the result you want. Lead continuous performance improvement within the scientific and technical environment using process mapping and analysis, root cause analysis that is informed by the appropriate Lean, Six Sigma, project and change management principles. They had to sleep Six Sigma into here somewhere, didn't they? This is a question about how reflective we are on our own capabilities. Have we actually had the results as efficiently as we could have done? And is there anything we could have done better to improve our science? And then finally, we have a group of behaviours. These are not skills, not knowledge. These are things that a scientist should be able to do. They should be able to communicate effectively to a scientific and non-scientific audience using oral presentation, scientific debate, and technical writing skill. This is where the public gets scientists wrong all the time. They think that we are people who stand around in lab coats and talk a load of dross that the majority of the world can't understand. A good scientist should be able to speak to as wide an audience as possible, in as many forms as possible. We'll all have our specialisms, we'll all have our preferred methods of communicating, but there's no point us being really intelligent if the world is left behind, if we don't find some way of bringing them along with us. Demonstrates reliability, integrity, and respect for confidentiality on work-related and personal matters, including appropriate use of social media and information systems. This hits a couple of different places. Reliability and integrity is quite important about presenting your data. But then also, I suppose there's an understanding here about if you work in quite an emotive field that involves personal data, or you shouldn't be intruding upon other people's personal information. Works autonomously and interacts effectively, including challenging assumptions within a wide multidisciplinary project team. Well, you may not work in a wide multidisciplinary project team, but wherever you do work, you should be autonomous, you should be self-driven, but you can interact effectively and contribute to the work of everyone else around you. Takes account of the impact of their work on others, especially where related to diversity and equality. Again, this comes back to, do you understand what the work you do and how other people will use it? And I suppose this depends upon your field, the complex ways that it could impact the wider world. Manages time effectively, being able to plan and complete work to a schedule. So we're back to, can a scientist, with the resources available to them, set tasks and complete them? Responds positively to change management processes and promotes change within working group. This is about responding to the conditions. If you set out with one set of equipment and one set of environments and things change, if work goes differently. But if things change and work goes differently, you've got to be able to respond to that. And then finally, takes responsibility for continuing personal and professional development, demonstrating commitment to learning and self-improvement, and supports the development of others as appropriate. Again, we're all learning. We didn't graduate with our degrees and PhDs and whatever other qualifications we may have as completely formed scientists. We are still always learning, still always taking that information, and hopefully, as I've already said, bringing up other people up alongside us to increase the knowledge pool of the whole world. They are written in a very legal, bureaucratic jargon, but I don't find much personally to disagree with these list of 28. It's, okay, a bit of a mouthful when I'm explaining to some of the apprentices specifically what one standard comes for, but no matter what your discipline is, I'd hope you recognise these 28. And if you can think of anything that's been left out that you think is absolutely essential, and there are other scientist research standards in the United Kingdom at a higher level. This is level 6, the equivalent of a degree level. There's a level 7 research scientist plan I could have a look at. If you can think of anything that's been left out that you think should be left in, or anything that's been said there that you think is a little bit controversial, please do put it in the comments below. I'd be keen to hear the international scientific community's thoughts on this.